He had left his billion-dollar phone inside an unlocked car. A stranger was just about to take it until a barefoot girl stepped in. What she did next left even the billionaire speechless. He believed he was just there to close a business deal, but what awaited him was a truth that would flip his entire world upside down. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to say hi. Now, let's begin the story. Ethan Maxwell, 38 years old, wasn't just another figure on the Forbes list. He was the figure. The genius behind Maxwell Global Logistics, a company valued in the multi-billion-dollar range. Ethan had the kind of power that could shift markets with a single pen stroke. On this blistering summer afternoon, his private jet had just touched down at a small dusty airstrip sitting quietly on the edge of New York City. Once forgotten and faded, the village he arrived in was now on the brink of transforming into a vital distribution point. And Ethan had come to finalize the deal. His sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom hummed smoothly as it drove along the cracked, uneven path toward the location. The village was hushed, its fading brick buildings and narrow lanes clutching the remnants of their history. It was the kind of place where money never stayed long. Until today, Ethan's arrival was nothing short of monumental. City officials were already present. The paperwork was ready. His very presence meant progress, jobs, roads, a future. But to Ethan, it was just another dot on the global map. Another asset. Another growth opportunity. His schedule was jam-packed, one meeting after another. There was already a major deal lined up in Chicago later that same week. Everything needed to run with machine-like precision. The sun was merciless, glaring down on the silent neighborhood that lay at the city's fringe. The heat waves danced in the air, and the pavement burned beneath their feet like the surface of a stove. Ethan Maxwell, dressed immaculately in a tailored navy suit and gleaming leather shoes, stepped out of the Rolls-Royce and winced instantly at the unforgiving sun. A few steps behind him, his assistant Thomas stayed glued to his phone, negotiating the final terms of the multi-million-dollar agreement that had brought them there. Ethan tugged at the collar of his shirt and exhaled in frustration. "Too damn hot," he muttered, wiping the sweat trickling down his temple. Just then, he noticed a street vendor a few feet away. He made a quick decision. "I'm grabbing a bottle of water," he said abruptly to Thomas, not pausing to hear any response. He leaned back into the car and grabbed a few bills, shoving them into his pocket. In his hurry and discomfort, Ethan didn't realize he had left behind his high-tech titanium smartphone, worth a fortune, not just in price, but in data. The device, brimming with confidential documents, major business contracts, private messages, and sensitive contacts, sat right there on the leather passenger seat. Even worse, the driver's side window had been left fully open. His focus was glued to the upcoming signing and the huge real estate consequences of the deal. He completely overlooked the massive risk he had just created. As he walked toward the vendor, the sunlight struck the phone just right. It glinted like a precious gem placed on display. The angle made it shimmer as though it was calling out to every passerby. It looked valuable because it was valuable. Anyone nearby could see that. The vendor handed him a cold bottle of water, and Ethan took a deep, satisfying sip. Tilting his head back, he let the cool liquid soothe his dry throat. For that brief second, he allowed himself to relax, without realizing that just 30 feet behind him, everything he had built sat exposed and unguarded. The afternoon heat poured mercilessly onto the street, making the air ripple like a mirage. The Rolls-Royce, parked beside a weathered fire hydrant, gleamed like a luxury artifact among the fading buildings and cracked sidewalks. It looked untouched, flawless, its chrome parts reflecting the sharp rays of the sun. Inside, clearly visible on the leather seat, was something worth more than most locals earned in an entire year. Ethan Maxwell's phone. The car window, slightly rolled down, left just enough space for a hand to slip inside, if someone had the nerve. And someone did. From the corner, he appeared. A young man, maybe in his 20s, tall and slim. His hoodie pulled low over his head despite the oppressive heat. He walked with a smooth, relaxed stride, his hands buried deep in his pockets, his eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced calculation. At first glance, he seemed like just another passerby. But as he neared the car, everything about him shifted. His head tilted slightly, his steps slowed, and his eyes locked on the shine of metal and glass inside the vehicle. A quick scan of the surroundings confirmed what he was hoping for. No police, no crowd, only silence, and the distant melody of an ice cream truck echoing down the street. With one more cautious look, he stepped closer to the Rolls-Royce, heart racing now, palms starting to sweat. It felt unreal. An open window. A billionaire's phone left right there in the open. He knew what such a device could be worth, not just in money. Its true value was in what it held inside. Names, deals, secrets. If sold to the right person, it could be everything. His fingers crept out from his pocket, trembling slightly as they edged toward the glass, just a little closer. A few more inches. The late afternoon sun burned down on the narrow street like fire, twisting the air and blurring the edges of everything it touched. The dust floated lazily in the breeze, stirred by footsteps and summer wind. But among the soft rhythm of the city, one small trio stood still, nearly invisible. Lily Thompson, just 9 years old, stood barefoot on the scorching pavement. Her messy blonde ponytail clung to her neck with sweat. A faded pink shirt, 2 sizes too small, stuck to her bony frame. Beside her stood Lucas and Liam, her 5-year-old twin brothers, identical in every way. Wide brown eyes, red noses from the sun, and worn-out clothes patched too many times to count. They were hungry again. Lily could feel it. Her stomach was hollow, her throat dry. But she didn't complain. She was the oldest. She had to be strong. They had spent the entire morning wandering through alleyways and parks, searching for leftover food or dropped coins. Nothing had turned up. Now they were walking toward a nearby church, hoping there might be sandwiches handed out today. That's when Lily saw something strange. Across the street sat a shiny black Rolls-Royce, one window slightly cracked. But that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the young man leaning toward the window, a teenager maybe, dressed in an old hoodie, nervous eyes darting from side to side. And then she saw it. His gaze fixed on something inside the car. Lily's stomach tightened. She knew that look. The boy stretched his hand forward slowly, trying not to be noticed. Her instincts roared. She stepped forward. Then again, her heart hammered in her chest. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice raspy and dry. "Don't touch that!" The boy froze. Lucas and Liam stared at her, confused, looking back and forth between their sister and the car. The boy turned, surprised. He hadn't seen her there. She walked closer, her fists tight at her sides. The boy flinched. He glared at her, eyes wide and annoyed. "Don't touch that," she repeated firmly. "I'll call the police." His face twisted. "Mind your business, brat," he growled, stepping toward her. But she didn't back away. Her eyes burned with a fierce courage no 9-year-old should ever need to know. "There's a cop at the market just down the street," she warned. "If you touch that phone, I'll scream loud enough for him to hear me." For a second, the world stood still. The boy's hands curled into fists. Lily felt her brothers trembling next to her, but she didn't move. Her chin stayed high. Her eyes stayed locked on his. Then, he cursed under his breath and bolted, vanishing into the nearby alleyway. After the boy disappeared, Lily stayed frozen, clutching Lucas's hand tightly. Liam held onto the torn edge of her shirt. The sun was merciless, beating down on the cracked pavement and making the Rolls-Royce shimmer like it was melting. Lily wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and turned around. "Come on," she said softly to her brothers. We still need to find something to eat. Lucas whimpered. Lily, I'm hungry. His voice was faint and dry. I know, baby, she whispered back. We'll find something. Just a little longer. They only took a few steps before Lily stopped again. Something pulled at her. Stronger than hunger. Stronger than the burning in her feet or the dizziness in her head. She turned back toward the car. The window was still open. The phone still sitting there in plain sight, glowing under the sun. Her breath caught. That boy was gone now. Yes, but others might see it too. Anyone could walk up and take it. And then what? That phone had to be worth more than everything she and her brothers had ever owned. But that wasn't what mattered. The man who owned it, he didn't even know it was in danger. He believed the world would protect what was his. She knew better. She lived in a world where people took what they needed because life didn't give anything for free. She could walk away now, and no one would judge her. But she couldn't. Not Lily. She looked at her brothers. Their cheeks were sunken, their hair tangled, their clothes stuck to their fragile bodies. Still, they were watching her, waiting for her choice. She turned fully toward the car. We're not leaving, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. We're staying until the owner comes back. Lucas blinked. But I'm hungry. I know, sweetheart, she said, kneeling and wrapping him in his arms. But this matters. If we leave, that man might lose something important. We have to help him, just like we'd want someone to help us. Liam tugged at her hand. Is he nice? I don't know, she said honestly. But that's not the point. Doing what's right doesn't depend on who's watching. With that, she led her brothers to the side of the car, where the shadow was slightly darker, and sat down on the boiling pavement. She shifted her body to shield them from the worst of the sun, wrapping her arms around them like wings. The afternoon sun outside New York's edge beat down like fire, turning the pavement beneath Lily's bare feet into a griddle. Shadows had shrunk short, and the heat pulsed off the Rolls-Royce like waves. Her throat was parched. Sweat clung to her face, but she didn't budge. Her brothers squirmed beside her, restless. We've been here forever, Liam grumbled, tugging on his oversized shirt. I'm hungry, Lily. I know, she murmured, not meeting his gaze. Just a little longer, okay? He has to come back. She glanced at the car. The window was still open, the expensive phone still lying there, untouched, glimmering under the harsh light. Her jaw tightened. That phone probably cost more than everything they had in their entire lives. She didn't even want to imagine what would happen if it got stolen, especially after chasing off that shady boy. She wrapped an arm around Lucas, who had started leaning against her shoulder. He was quiet now. That scared her. When he went silent, it usually meant his stomach pain was getting worse. She felt like a bad sister for making them stay, hungry and hot, with no food or water. But something inside her, a strong, stubborn sense of right and wrong, told her they had to stay. We can't leave it, she whispered to herself. What if someone else comes? What if he loses everything because we didn't wait? They'd already taken a risk stopping that thief. Most people would have walked by. Most people wouldn't care about the things a man in a suit left behind. But Lily wasn't most people. She had already lost too much in life to let something bad happen when she could stop it. She shifted again, trying to create more shade for the twins with her small body. It didn't help much. The heat pressed down like a heavy blanket. Still, she stayed. For a moment, doubt slipped into her thoughts. What if the man never came back? What if the car wasn't even his? What if they were waiting for nothing? But no. She forced the thoughts away. She had made a choice. She would guard that phone until the owner returned, even if it took all day. Even if it meant searching for food in the dark. She would wait. She stared down the road, eyes blinking against the sun's harsh glare. No sign of him yet. But she wasn't giving up. Not now. I promise, she whispered to her brothers, her voice barely audible over the soft breeze. Once this is over, we'll get something to eat. Just hang in there for me, please. And so the three of them waited, hungry, sweating, and completely worn out, watching over something that wasn't even theirs. They did it not for reward, not for recognition, but simply because they believed it was the right thing to do. That's just who Lily Thompson was. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the village rooftops by the time Ethan Maxwell returned to the quiet, dusty street where his elegant black Rolls-Royce was parked. Dressed in a crisp navy blue tailored suit and wearing designer sunglasses, Ethan looked every bit like the billionaire people knew him to be. Right behind him was his assistant, Thomas Reed, holding a thick leather folder stuffed with contracts and schedules for the next meeting. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead and reached for his key fob to unlock the vehicle when something made him pause. Something didn't feel right. Sitting calmly by the side of his car were three scruffy children. A young girl, maybe around 9 years old, with messy blonde hair tied in a loose ponytail, sat cross-legged with her chin resting quietly on her knees. Next to her were two small boys, both about 5, their heads leaning tiredly against one another. Their clothes were faded, stained, torn along the edges. The soles of their worn sandals were coming apart. But what pulled Ethan's attention sharply wasn't their presence. It was the car window. His passenger side window was still open. His heart jumped. He stepped in closer, a rising sense of unease creeping into his chest. Had these kids tried to get inside his car? Had they taken something already? Before he could speak, the girl noticed him. She stood quickly, brushing off her skirt, eyes wide but steady. "Sir," she called out, her voice clear. "This is your car, right?" Ethan, slightly taken aback by her calmness, nodded. "Yes, it is." She took a breath. "We saw someone walk up to it. He looked like he wanted to take something from inside. We chased him off. We've been waiting here just to make sure no one else tried." Ethan stared at her, momentarily speechless. He looked past her into the car, and there it was. His phone, his ultra-secure, encrypted smartphone, untouched, sitting exactly where he'd left it. Thomas, now realizing what had happened, stammered, "Sir, I'm so sorry. This was my responsibility. I should have checked the window. I didn't mean—" Ethan raised a hand gently to stop him. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl and her 2 younger brothers, who sat quietly, uncertain whether they were in trouble. Their clothes were thin, their faces sunken with hunger. But the girl's eyes, her eyes were sharp, honest, and unwavering. "You waited here?" Ethan asked softly, lowering himself slightly to her eye level. "You stayed to protect this?" She nodded. "We saw him reach for something. We got scared he might come back. So we stayed." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He couldn't say what it was. Guilt, maybe. Or gratitude. Or something deeper. Something unfamiliar. These children had nothing. And yet they chose to guard a stranger's belongings. Not because anyone told them to. Not because they had anything to gain. Just because it was the right thing to do. As he straightened, looking once more at the untouched phone inside his car, Ethan Maxwell realized something that surprised even him. After years of guarding assets, signing contracts, and building walls around everything he owned, this moment, this unexpected act of kindness, was what made him feel truly exposed and moved. What had nearly been taken wasn't just a phone. It was a glimpse of honor, of selflessness, of quiet bravery still alive in the most unexpected corners of the world. And this girl had offered it to him without asking for anything. He looked into her eyes. There was no fear there. No pride. Just honesty. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't looking for praise. She was simply telling him what happened, like keeping watch over a billionaire's forgotten phone was something ordinary. "You really stayed right here in this heat Just to wait for me to return and protect my stuff? Ethan asked, his voice catching slightly. Lily nodded again. We thought if we left, someone else might come. So we waited. But now we really need to go. She turned to leave, reaching out to Liam's hand, with Lucas following slowly behind, visibly weak and tired. Ethan didn't move. The background noise of the city faded into silence. For a man who dealt in billion-dollar transactions over phone calls, this moment felt strangely foreign. He had just witnessed 3 children, complete strangers, choose to protect what belonged to him, even when they were running on empty. And now, those same children were quietly walking away, worn out and hungry, without asking for a single thing. Wait, Ethan called, his voice gentler than he intended. Lily paused. She didn't turn around, but the twins did. Their small faces were pale beneath layers of dust and sun. Lucas looked at Ethan with a confused, tired stare. Liam instinctively held onto his sister's arm, waiting for her lead. I want to thank you, Ethan said, stepping forward. The gravel under his loafers crunched faintly. I'd like to get you something to eat. A proper meal. Please, let me. Lily finally turned, slowly, her shoulders tense. Why? She asked, her voice light but not childish. There was weight behind it, like it belonged to someone much older than her years. Ethan hesitated. Because you protected something of mine. Even though there was nothing in it for you. That means something. She didn't respond right away. She simply looked at him. Then her gaze dropped to Liam, who was now holding his stomach, his lips beginning to tremble. Ethan noticed, and it unsettled something deep inside him. I know it's not much, he said softly, but at least let me make sure you eat something warm today. Still quiet, Lily looked at him again. Really looked. This wasn't someone she trusted. His watch probably cost more than every house on their block. His shirt was spotless. His shoes had never seen a hole. He lived in a world so far from hers. It might as well have been a different universe. But there was something in his tone. Hesitant, almost unsure. That didn't sound fake. We don't take things from people, Lily said. Not unless we earn it. You earned it, Ethan replied without hesitation. You earned far more than a meal. But this is the least I can do. She paused. She was torn. Pride was a strange thing. It kept her strong, but it couldn't fill her brothers' empty bellies. And Lucas, his knees were shaking now. Finally, she whispered, Are you serious, sir? Ethan lowered himself to her level again, letting his briefcase rest on the ground beside him. Yes, he said with quiet certainty. Whatever you want, you name it. She blinked. Her eyes shimmered faintly with a careful kind of hope. We don't need much, she said. Just a plate of rice. Something warm. We haven't had rice in days. They miss it. She glanced at her brothers. I miss it too. Ethan's throat tightened. A plate of rice. That's all they wanted. No money. No favors. Just food. He stood and turned to Thomas, who was still nearby, clearly shaken. Thomas, Ethan said, find us somewhere to eat. Clean. Warm. Quiet. Yes, Mr. Maxwell. Thomas replied. Quickly, already pulling out his phone, Ethan turned back to Lily. Let's go. We'll ride together. My car's right here. But Lily shook her head. We'll walk. We don't ride in cars with people we don't know. That made Ethan pause. Then, he smiled. Not offended, but impressed. Fair enough, he said. Then we'll walk together. Just tell me where to go. Lily stepped forward carefully. There's a small diner 2 blocks down. Sometimes we stand outside just to smell the bread baking. They don't chase us away. Lead the way, Ethan said. And so they did. As they walked, Ethan stayed just a step behind, watching Lily wrap an arm around both her brothers. They didn't say much, but he could see it now. How much she carried. Not just hunger, but the weight of responsibility, of being the grown-up in a world that had left them behind. At the corner, Lily slowed, glancing back to check if Ethan was still with them. He gave a small nod. Inside the diner, the waitress looked up, ready to send the kids away, until she saw Ethan walk in behind them. Her eyes widened. "They're with me," Ethan said simply. The server blinked. "How many?" Ethan looked at Lily. "You three okay for now?" She nodded. He turned back to the waitress. "3 meals. Make it your best. Extra rice. And something sweet for dessert, please." As they sat, Lily looked at him once more. Her eyes still carried caution, but they were softer now. "Thank you," she said. Ethan didn't smile. He looked her in the eye and said, "No, thank you." And deep down, he already knew. This wasn't where their story ended. Not even close. Ethan Maxwell had spent his life in boardrooms, shaking hands with billionaires, boarding private jets, and finalizing deals worth 10 figures. His world revolved around numbers, charts, fiscal targets, and strategy calls. But tonight, as he sat in the back seat of his black Rolls-Royce Phantom heading back to Manhattan, none of those things were on his mind. Instead, the only image that lingered, etched behind his eyelids, was of a little girl with tangled golden hair tied in a ponytail, standing like a sentry beside his car. Her clothes were worn, her sandals nearly falling apart, and yet, she had stood with more strength than many men Ethan had met in his career. Her voice still echoed in his ears. "Sir, we stayed here to protect your things." His driver weaved through the bright, chaotic Manhattan night, but Ethan barely noticed the glowing city lights streaking past the tinted windows. Up front, his assistant Thomas had tried multiple times to talk about the contract they just closed or remind him of tomorrow's shareholder meeting. Ethan had only nodded, offering distant hums in reply. Eventually, Thomas gave up and went silent. There was something heavy in Ethan's chest. A strange, unfamiliar weight. It wasn't stress. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't even anxiety. It was something far deeper. A mix of guilt and awe. 2 hours. That little girl had sat outside his car for more than 2 hours, with 2 younger brothers who were clearly starving, just to make sure no one took what didn't belong to them. She didn't owe him anything. She didn't know who he was. He hadn't promised her a reward. She simply chose to protect what was right, even though she had nothing. And what had he done? He had almost assumed the worst. When he and Thomas first walked up and saw the children near his vehicle, his first instinct had been suspicion. He remembered how his eyes narrowed, how his jaw clenched as he imagined them trying to steal from him. But then she stood, calm, confident, without fear. "We saw someone trying to take something from your car," she said. "We stopped him. We waited for you." Ethan had built his career on understanding people. And in that instant, he knew she wasn't lying. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She wasn't asking for anything. She had been ready to leave with her brothers, quietly, once she felt her duty was complete. He had asked himself again and again, since leaving the diner, why? Why would someone with so little do something so pure? And more importantly, what had he done recently that came anywhere close to that level of integrity? The question stayed with him as the car pulled into the underground garage of his luxurious condo. He stepped out, but not with his usual sharp authority. The sound of his polished shoes echoed through the glass and marble hallway. But instead of power, they now sounded hollow, like footsteps of someone carrying a weight he didn't fully understand. Ethan rode the elevator to the top floor and stopped in front of his floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below. Manhattan, alive with dreams and ambition. Deals, were being made. Futures were being built. And somewhere out there in the same city, an 8-year-old girl had stood watch over a stranger's car while going hungry. He loosened his tie, but the pressure in his chest didn't go away. Lily's face haunted him. Exhausted, yet unflinching. Her brothers, Liam and Lucas, devouring that simple meal of chicken and rice like it was a banquet. That image stayed with him longer than any corporate failure ever had. He could have lost that phone if it had been stolen. All the sensitive documents, business plans, partnership deals, confidential data, proprietary information could have been leaked. It would have crushed the company he had spent 20 years building. It could have ruined hundreds, maybe thousands of livelihoods. But instead, 3 children who had nothing had saved it. Without knowing what it meant, without expecting anything in return, Ethan sank onto the edge of his leather couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He had always believed emotions were weaknesses in business, that good decisions required distance. But now he wondered, had that mindset blinded him to the things that actually mattered? He thought back to Lily's parting words at the diner. "Thank you, sir, not just for the food, for listening." He had listened, and now he couldn't forget. Thomas appeared in the doorway, knocking gently. "Sir, I have your schedule for tomorrow. Would you like me to—" Ethan raised his hand. "Thomas, I need you to find them." Thomas blinked. "Sir?" "The girl, Lily, and her brothers," Ethan said, standing, his eyes darker than before. "Find where they live. I want to know everything, who they are, what they're dealing with. All of it." Thomas hesitated. "Should I contact security? Or maybe private investigators?" "No," Ethan replied, his voice low but filled with purpose. "This isn't surveillance. This is gratitude. Maybe even redemption." Thomas nodded slowly and exited. Ethan returned to the window and rested his hand on the cold glass. The skyline still glowed, but tonight, it looked different. Because, for the first time in years, Ethan Maxwell wasn't just seeing the lights. He was seeing the shadows, the forgotten, and maybe, just maybe, a new purpose. Later that night, Ethan sat alone in the back seat of his Rolls-Royce. The lights of Manhattan slid across the tinted windows like silent ghosts. The city was awake, pulsing with wealth, ambition, and movement. The very forces that had built his empire. But none of that felt relevant tonight. Thomas sat in the front passenger seat, quiet. Neither of them had said much since the meal. The kids, Lily and her brothers, had stirred something in Ethan. He just couldn't put it into words yet. He clutched the phone they had protected. That one careless mistake could have ended everything. The device held years of private conversations, blueprints, patents, merger details. If it had fallen into the wrong hands, the collapse would have been swift and brutal. But it hadn't, because of 3 forgotten children, alone, dirty, starving, who chose to do the right thing. Ethan stared at the screen before tapping it. He called a contact he rarely used: private security and investigation services. By the next morning, Ethan was already at his office. It was unusually early. His corner suite on the 42nd floor overlooked the skyline. The view that once symbolized success now felt empty. Sunlight broke through the clouds. Thomas walked in with a manila folder in hand. His face was unreadable. "We finished the background checks," Thomas said. "On the girl?" Ethan asked. "On all 3, Thomas replied, handing him the file. Ethan opened it. Name: Lily Thompson. Age: 9. Status: orphaned. Mother: deceased. Linda Thompson had died 3 years ago of stage 4 cancer. Father: incarcerated. Marcus Thompson was serving time for aggravated assault. No parole date on record. Siblings: Lucas and Liam Thompson, age 5. Identical twins. The folder included a blurry photo of their mother, gentle eyes, holding a much younger Lily with a quiet, tired smile. Jesus, Ethan whispered. Thomas continued. They were evicted last year after falling behind on rent. Since then, they've been moving between alleys, shelters, and abandoned buildings. No formal help. No extended family stepped up. Their mother passed away in a basic clinic with no, proper cancer treatment. She couldn't afford chemo. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He turned to the window, but the city no longer comforted him. This can't be real, he said, his voice shaking. There's more, Thomas said softly. We found out where they stay now. You'll want to see it for yourself. An hour later, Ethan stood in a decaying alley on the outskirts of the city. The walls were peeling, the air heavy with the stench of garbage and stagnant water. The light barely reached the ground. This is it? Ethan asked, stunned. Thomas nodded. Third unit. It's not a real home. Just a shell of one. They walked slowly toward a wooden door with a broken latch. The place looked like it would collapse under a strong gust of wind. Ethan knocked. Gently. The door creaked open. A small face peeked out, pale with sunken cheeks and wide, hollow eyes. He couldn't have been more than 8. Hi, the boy whispered. Ethan crouched. Is Lily here? The boy blinked. She's helping Lucas clean up. We share the soap. Before Ethan could reply, another voice came from within. Are you the man with the car? It was Lily. She stepped out from the darkness like a shadow, entering the light. Her eyes met his, surprised at first, then uncertain. She held a towel in one hand and wore the same worn-out dress from the day before. Why are you here? She asked, cautious and guarded. I needed to know, Ethan replied. I wanted to see where you live, to thank you properly. Lily didn't answer right away. Behind her, Ethan noticed movement. Other children. 4. No, 5. No, 6 more. That made 8 in total. They stood inside the dim, damp space, staring at him with a mix of fear and fatigue. Some looked nervous. Others just looked drained. Are they all? Ethan asked, unable to finish his sentence. Like us? Lily said flatly. Yeah, no parents, no one who wanted us. One girl, maybe 10, had a black eye so swollen she could barely open it. A boy, around 12, coughed with such force it hurt to listen. A toddler sat on a torn blanket, gnawing on a dry crust of bread that crumbled between her tiny fingers. Ethan's mouth went dry. He couldn't form words. Who takes care of all of you? Thomas asked gently. We take care of each other, Lily said, lifting her chin with quiet pride. We have rules. We all help. Benny shines shoes. Lucy and Sarah sell newspapers. I look after the twins. We share everything. Food, chores, even our sadness. Where do you sleep? Ethan asked softly. Wherever it's warmest, she replied. And when someone gets sick, we wait. Sometimes it goes away. Sometimes it doesn't. The room fell into silence. Ethan took a slow step forward, his expensive shoes crunching the broken tiles beneath his feet. The air smelled of mildew, of dampness, and forgotten corners. But underneath the despair was something else. Something stronger, an unshakable resilience. No parents, no protection, no doctors, no school, no future. And yet somehow they were still here, organizing themselves, caring for one another, surviving when the world had given them nothing. It was too much. Ethan turned away, blinking hard. And then, suddenly, tears streamed down his face. Hot, bitter, unstoppable. Thomas turned aside, respectfully silent. I'm sorry, Ethan choked, Barely able to speak. "I'm so sorry." Lily stared at him, confused. "Why are you crying?" "Because I didn't know," Ethan said through trembling lips. "I didn't know kids like you were living like this. I didn't know my city had let this happen. I didn't know. How blind I've been." Lily stepped forward and placed her small hand on his. "You know now." That night, Ethan didn't return to Manhattan. He stayed with the children, sitting on the floor, listening to their stories. One child had lost his mother to untreated diabetes. Another's father had vanished after losing his job. One didn't even know who their parents were, and yet none of them asked for pity. None begged. Instead, they cracked jokes. They helped each other clean up before eating. One boy even offered Ethan the final piece of bread he had. Ethan declined, but the gesture nearly broke him. These children weren't a problem. They were a promise. The next morning, Ethan Maxwell stood quietly on a gravel path just outside the small village. His luxury Blacktown car waited behind him like a relic from far. A world that no longer felt like his. The air was thick with the scent of wet soil and wood smoke drifting from rusted chimneys nearby. But Ethan didn't belong to that world anymore. Not fully. Not after Lily. Not after her brothers. Not after meeting those 7 other children. Each, one living in a crumbling structure so broken it barely qualified as a shelter. It wasn't just a house. It was a cry for help. A symbol of how far the most vulnerable could fall while cities chased progress. In his left hand, Ethan held rolled-up construction plans worth over $200 million. He had envisioned a high-end luxury resort. Here, something to rival coastal destinations. Spa suites, a helipad, Michelin-starred cuisine. Investors were already counting their returns, but all he could see were 8 fragile faces peeking from broken windows. Hollow cheeks, cautious smiles, hope that should have withered but hadn't. He thought back to when his private security team first found the children's hideout. He'd expected a dump, maybe a few kids squatting in a shed, but nothing prepared him for what he saw. Rotting, walls covered in mold, rusted bed frames stacked with old, threadbare blankets, one cracked jug holding the only water they had. And scattered across that room, like stars clinging to the last of the night, were children. 8 of them. This oldest was 12. The youngest couldn't have been more than 3. He remembered how Lily sprang up when she saw him, unsure whether to run or stay. Lucas had wrapped himself around her leg, and Liam had stared up at him with those wide amber eyes. Then there was Max, the 12-year-old boy who fixed shoes on street corners. Jaime, the girl who rarely spoke above a whisper, yet still shared her bread. The twins, Rosie and Ryan, barefoot and selling papers every morning. And little Ella, who hadn't spoken a word since her parents died in a fire. Ethan had knelt beside them. "Who takes care of you?" They had all pointed to each other. No adults, no government, just kids. Keeping kids alive. That night, Ethan returned to his hotel suite but didn't touch the filet mignon the chef had prepared. He didn't sleep. He didn't check the stock market, something he hadn't skipped in over 2 decades. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, asking himself a question that haunted him. What good is having everything if I turn my back on those who have nothing? By sunrise, he was standing at the construction site again. Surveyors waited nearby. His project manager, Derek, approached with architectural blueprints in hand. "Mr. Maxwell, the equipment is scheduled to arrive next week. The excavation crew will cancel it," Ethan said, cutting him off. Derek blinked. "Sir, we're not building a resort," Ethan replied, his voice firm but calm. "You mean, scale it down? Change the layout?" "No," Ethan said, meeting his eyes. "I mean, cancel it completely. We're using this land for something else. But the investors, I'll buy them out if I have to," Ethan said, his jaw clenched with conviction. "Every last one. This land is going to serve a different purpose. Something better. Derek looked down at the papers, then back at Ethan. "What are we building, sir?" Ethan smiled gently. "A home." The word held power. He turned and pointed across the field. "The main building goes there. Classrooms over here. A dining hall on that side. Medical office. Gardens. Dorms with real beds. A library, too. I want music lessons, art, desks, books, and smiles." "You want to build a school?" Derek asked, still stunned. "No," Ethan replied. "Not just a school. A sanctuary. A place where no child is ever forgotten again. We'll call it Maxwell Home." Derek stood frozen. "I want every orphaned, abandoned child in this district, no, in this state, to have a shot at something better." Ethan continued. "To be safe, to grow, to be loved, and to know that they matter." He turned toward the road that led back to the village. His voice softened. "Because 8 kids reminded me yesterday that the world doesn't run on profits and spreadsheets. It runs on people who refuse to look away when others are hurting. People like Lily." Her words still echoed in his mind. "Sir, we stayed to protect your things, but now we have to find food." And she hadn't asked for a reward. Not money. Not favor. Just a simple meal. A touch of dignity. Ethan's throat tightened as he looked back at Derek. "You know what she asked me for?" Derek shook his head. "Rice." Ethan whispered. "She just wanted a bowl of rice." There was a long pause. "And yet she gave me loyalty, courage, and honesty." When she had every reason to keep walking, Derek bowed his head, humbled. "I'll notify the team." "No," Ethan said. "I will. They need to hear it from me." He walked away from the site, heading back to his car. As the engine came to life, he stared at the same phone that had nearly cost him everything. His company, his name, his secrets. But at that moment, it felt meaningless compared to what he would have lost if Lily and her brothers hadn't been there. Now, it was his turn to protect them. To protect all of them. Because, in a world obsessed with ambition, he had finally learned what real success meant. Not what you build for yourself, but what you build for others when no one's watching. Maxwell Home would rise, not from blueprints or billion-dollar funding, but from a promise. A promise made beside a car window, between a billionaire and a barefoot girl who had nothing but integrity in her pocket. The Manhattan skyline glowed gold as the late afternoon sun spilled through the glass walls of Ethan Maxwell's penthouse. The man who once ruled corporate towers and boardrooms now stood silently in his kitchen, watching 3 small figures sitting at his long marble dining table. Lily sat in the middle, her arms gently around her twin brothers, Lucas and Liam, helping them unwrap the neatly folded napkins and showing them how to properly hold forks and knives. It was all unfamiliar territory for them. Above, the chandelier shimmered softly, casting golden halos over their blonde hair. These same children who, just days ago, had sat barefoot under the blazing sun, guarding a stranger's car with nothing but grit and loyalty. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He was supposed to be in Singapore this week. Or maybe Dubai. Possibly both. His calendar used to be a blur of red-eye flights, corporate meetings, investor briefings, and the endless rhythm of high-stakes ambition. But now, all of that, his entire world, felt painfully hollow next to the sound of a child's laughter. A boy who had never tasted hot cocoa until this morning. It had been only 5 days since that chance encounter near the construction site. 5 days since Lily had stood her ground against a potential thief and made a choice that would change both their lives forever. Just 5 days. And Ethan Maxwell would never be the same. He remembered the precise moment it all shifted. Not when he walked back to his car and saw the children. Not even when Lily warned him about the man who tried to steal his phone. And it wasn't when she'd quietly said, "Sir, we have to go now." My brothers are hungry. No, the moment came later. After the meal. After the soft thank yous. After his research team emailed him the photos of the crumbling shack those children called home. That night, in the quiet of his penthouse, Ethan had opened the final report and read through it slowly. 8 children, ages 3 to 12, malnourished, unsheltered, orphaned or abandoned, all living in a condemned single-room structure with no access to clean water, school, or medical care. By the end of the report, something inside Ethan had shifted. Something more powerful than duty. These kids had absolutely nothing. And still, Lily hadn't asked for help. Not for money. Not even for pity. She'd only asked for food. For her little brothers. And even then, she had hesitated, almost refusing until Ethan gently insisted. Ethan had spent his life building things. Global logistics centers, massive infrastructure projects, cross-border systems. But none of it had ever felt as meaningful as the opportunity he now held. The chance to build lives. Lives worth saving. That's when the plans changed. The land he'd purchased near New York, originally set aside for a high-end luxury resort, was now being reimagined. It would become something different. Something better. A new vision. Maxwell Home. A sprawling sanctuary designed specifically for orphaned and homeless children. Dormitories, classrooms, medical facilities, playgrounds, libraries. Not just a shelter. A community. A refuge for those the world had pushed aside. Some investors were baffled. Others were furious. A few threatened legal action. Ethan didn't flinch. He called an emergency board meeting and calmly presented the new development. Blueprint. There are things in this world more important than quarterly returns, he told the room of stunned executives. We're not only in the business of profits, we're in the business of purpose. Then he left the meeting, got into his car, and asked his driver to take him back to the alley. The children didn't recognize the vehicle this time. It was less flashy, more discreet. But when Lily saw Ethan step out and kneel beside the smallest boy, offering him a toy car, she gasped. "Mr. Maxwell?" she asked. He smiled. "Hi, Lily." She turned, gesturing toward the others. "This is everyone. Mia, Caleb, Josh, Arya, and Benji. They're like our brothers and sisters." Ethan looked around at their fragile faces, the threadbare clothes, the uncertain but hopeful eyes. He didn't see a burden. He saw possibility. He met Lily's gaze. "Would it be okay if I helped all of you?" She blinked, unsure. "You mean, like more food?" "No," Ethan said gently. "I mean a real home. Clean clothes, doctors, school, toys. And not just for one day, for always." Her lower lip trembled. Her eyes shimmered. "But we don't have anything to give you back." "You've already given me more than I ever knew I needed," Ethan whispered. That night, arrangements were made. The next morning, Lily and the twins moved into Ethan's home. Not a guest room, not a temporary setup. His actual home. They became part of his life, not just a cause. A private tutor was brought in. Pediatricians conducted full medical checkups. And for the first time in decades, Ethan found himself asking about bedtime stories and allergy lists instead of interest rates and quarterly margins. The other 5 children were placed in high-quality foster care, only temporarily, until Maxwell Home was ready to open, which would happen within 6 months. Construction had already begun, but the real transformation was happening inside Ethan. One afternoon, several weeks later, he stood on his rooftop terrace watching the sunset with Lily at his side. She held a children's book in one hand and a warm cup of tea in the other. Far below, the city hummed with traffic and ambition. "You know," he said softly, "I used to think success meant skyscrapers, private jets, applause. And now?" Lily asked. "Now, he said, glancing at the twins playing joyfully in the living room. I think success means knowing that someone like you can fall asleep at night without worrying about what tomorrow might bring. Lily smiled. We never had a tomorrow. Before. A lump formed in his throat. You do now. In Ethan's home office, beside the framed Forbes covers and company awards, there now hung a photo, 8 children standing in front of a collapsing house. Barefoot. Hungry. Smiling. He kept that photo there to remind him of where everything truly began. Not at a business merger. Not in a boardroom. But on a dusty street, when 3 starving children chose to protect something that wasn't theirs and gave him something he didn't even know he'd lost. A purpose. A family. A second chance to be human. That morning it had started to rain. Lightly. Softly. As if even the sky understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. Inside the grand hall of the New York State Family Court, Ethan Maxwell sat wearing a tailored navy suit, his usual sharp demeanor replaced by quiet nerves. He wasn't here today as the CEO of Maxwell Global Logistics. He wasn't here to sign billion-dollar contracts. Today, he was here as a man hoping to become a father. Across the courtroom, 3 small figures sat at the front bench. Lily, now 9, flanked on either side by her 5-year-old twin brothers, Lucas and Liam. She wore a borrowed yellow dress, a bit too big, with a faded ribbon holding her ponytail in place, the same one Ethan had seen her wear the day they met. The boys clung to her hands tightly, despite their new clothes and warm home. A shadow of fear still lingered in their wide hazel eyes, the kind of uncertainty born from losing everything far too young. The room murmured softly with the rustle of papers, the tap of a clerk typing, and the quiet patter of rain against the tall windows. Ethan's adoption attorney, Marie Goldstein, leaned in. They've reviewed everything. The court believes in your intentions. We're just waiting on the final ruling from the judge. But Ethan barely heard her. His eyes stayed locked on the haunted children. He remembered that first day, how they sat beside his car in the heat, guarding his forgotten phone with nothing but their tiny bodies and enormous hearts. That one moment had unraveled every definition he had ever held about success, about value, about love. And now, here they were, waiting to see if someone would finally choose them, not just for today, but for forever. Judge Malene Ruiz, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and steady, compassionate eyes, adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file in front of her. Her voice, when it came, was calm but authoritative. Mr. Ethan Maxwell, she said, lifting her gaze, you have petitioned this court to adopt 3 minors. Lily Thompson, age 9, and Lucas and Liam Thompson, age 5. Do you understand that, if granted, this adoption will be legal and permanent? You will assume all parental rights and responsibilities. I understand, Your Honor, Ethan said, his voice steady but full of emotion. And I'm ready, Ethan said softly. The judge gave a small nod. The court has reviewed the psychological evaluations, financial disclosures, background checks, your home inspection, and the testimony from the children's social worker. Every report confirms that the children are thriving in your care. She paused. But more importantly, she continued, her tone softening. The court has observed your relationship with the children over the past 6 months. Your devotion, not just through material support, but emotional investment, has been clear. Lily's grip on her brothers tightened. She bit her lower lip, unsure why her eyes were filling with tears. She didn't fully understand what this moment would bring. Was it the end of something, or the beginning of something she might finally be allowed to keep? Judge Ruiz resumed, her voice growing gentler. The children became orphaned after the passing of their mother and the incarceration of their father, who, as this court acknowledges, has formally relinquished his parental rights. They were living in conditions deemed unfit for any child, and yet today, they are safe, they are healthy, and most importantly, They are loved. Ethan's throat clenched. He dropped his eyes for a brief second, too overwhelmed to speak. Would you like to say anything before I give the court's final decision? The judge asked with warmth in her voice. Ethan stood slowly, his tall frame rising with quiet purpose. He stepped forward, not to the judge, but to the children. When I met you, he began, looking at Lily, you chose to protect something that didn't belong to you, something you had no reason to guard, but you did it anyway, because you believed it was the right thing to do. His voice trembled. And in that moment, I realized the world didn't deserve your strength if it wasn't willing to protect it. You changed my life that day. All three of you did. And all I want, he paused to steady himself, is the chance to spend the rest of my life being the father you've never had. A father who truly sees you. A father who stays. Lucas blinked slowly. Liam leaned gently into Lily, whispering something only she could hear. Judge Ruiz cleared her throat, and even her voice wavered slightly. Let the record show that Mr. Ethan Maxwell has formally expressed his intentions before the court and the children. She lifted the gavel. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. In the eyes of the state of New York, she declared, I hereby deem this adoption lawful and binding. Lily, Lucas, and Liam Thompson are now, legally and permanently, the children of Mr. Ethan Maxwell. With a soft but unmistakable sound, the gavel came down. The courtroom remained still until Lily suddenly gasped, eyes wide. Did she say, we're his kids now? She whispered, blinking up at Ethan. His smile wavered, tears welling. Yes, sweetheart. You're mine now. Forever. Lily bolted from her seat and flew into his arms. The twins scrambled after her, nearly stumbling in their rush. Ethan dropped to his knees, catching them all in a tight embrace, the kind of hug he never knew he needed until this very second. Outside, reporters waited, cameras clicking, voices shouting, but none of them could truly capture what had just taken place inside. They didn't hear Ethan's quiet sob as Lily whispered into his ear, I knew you'd come back. They didn't hear the laughter of the twins, genuine and bright, for the first time in months. They didn't notice the judge discreetly dabbing a tear from the corner of her eye. The media would go on to write about a billionaire adopting orphans. They'd craft stories filled with drama, speculation, redemption arcs, and headlines about reputation. But they would miss the truth entirely. This wasn't about public image. This was about healing. After the proceedings, Ethan walked out of the courtroom, holding Lily's hand in one and a twin's hand in each of the others. The rain had stopped. The clouds had broken apart, letting rays of golden light spill onto the city. New York buzzed on as it always did. Restless, relentless. But for Ethan, everything had changed. He wasn't walking out as a CEO. He was walking out as a father. That night, in the penthouse that once echoed with silence, laughter filled the space like sunlight through the windows. Lucas and Liam chased each other barefoot down the smooth marble hallway, giggling. In the kitchen, Lily stood beside Ethan, helping prepare sandwiches with serious concentration. She insisted on making one for him, with exactly the right amount of mustard. Dad, she called out cheerfully, without a trace of hesitation. Dinner's ready. Ethan froze. It was the first time she had called him that. He turned, blinking away a sudden swell of tears. Thanks, sweetheart. Later, when the children were tucked into warm blankets, asleep in real beds, for the first time in years, Ethan stood quietly on the balcony. The city stretched beneath him, alive with lights and noise, but his mind was somewhere else. He thought of the forgotten phone, the sun-beaten village road, and the little girl with a bravery that outshined the skyline. He whispered into the night, Thank you for finding me. We'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below and rate this story from 10 to 100. Let us know where you're watching from too. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a story like this one again. If this touched your heart, check out more uplifting videos by clicking on the end screen now.